What's the coolest update a game can get?
Mountains.
Maybe the devs rework an old mechanic and make it way better. Maybe they add a fan-favorite weapon that can become a staple of the game as a whole. Or maybe they change the gameplay so drastically that the game becomes fundamentally different from how it was before. If you ask Team Fortress 2 fans, however, many of them will cite the Man vs. Machine update, where Valve would add a brand new game mode to the game, transforming TF2's gameplay from a PvP game to a PvE one, and making the transition beautifully. This is widely regarded as one of the best updates the game has ever seen, and arguably one of the greatest updates in gaming history. But it wasn't as straightforward as you may expect. Valve wasn't just going to give this update to the community for nothing. They wanted to make them work for it. And so, Valve created a network of pictures, codes, and puzzles for TF2 players to solve over the course of not just months, but years. An ARG that the TF2 community had to complete before one of the game's greatest updates would ever be released. This is the story of how TF2's community came together to unlock Man vs. Machine. The day is May 5th, 2010. Valve just released a rather insignificant update for Team Fortress 2, the 119th update, which added the mercenary badges, buffed the backburner, and that was about it. Well, aside from one more thing, a video. Uploaded on the same day to the official TF2 YouTube account would be the most notable thing to come out of the 119th update. It teased the upcoming Engineer update, and featured a short animation of the titular Texan working on some new tech that would come to the game in the near future. What many wouldn't realize is that Valve's animators hid a handful of references in this trailer to what would later be known as Man vs. Machine. The first update page for the Engineer update, once it released, also featured a depiction of a scout robot, made to mimic Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. These bits of foreshadowing are all here, in these two short teasers, over 2 years before the actual update would ever release. While the vast majority of the community seemed to miss these robot heads, some observant members would note the deliberate hints being dropped by Valve. The first person to discover and document these Easter eggs was a YouTuber by the name of Donzor, who dropped a video titled The Engineer Update Trailer Analyzed, going over everything I've just explained, on the same day the video came out.
Stuff I noticed. Valve sure likes to hide stuff in their videos.
Unfortunately, this video is private, so we can no longer see exactly what Donzor's specific thoughts were on these Easter eggs. But judging by his thoughts in the archived comment section, he might not have been too far off from the truth.
Most likely it's a new model that only the bots use, to see who is real player and who is just a bot. That's what the news stories hinted in the hidden links. It might not have anything else to do with the engineer, other than he might have built and designed them.
Another mention I could find of these MVM items is from a German gaming magazine called GameStar. In an article from them on June 6, 2010, they note that the general perspective from the community seemed to be that the robot parts connected in some way with Engineer as a class. Some people had already wanted him to receive the ability to build robots as opposed to sentries, so this seemed like it could have been Valve listening to the fans and giving them what they wanted. Clearly, the community at large couldn't predict what was actually about to happen. This absolute confusion was most evident by Spuff, or the Steam-powered user forums. If you're a relatively new Steam user, you may not be aware that these ever existed, but before the Discussions tab you now have attached to every game, there was a separate website that Steam users would go on to discuss their favorite games. In TF2's infancy, from 2007 to around 2012, this was where the majority of fans went to discuss TF2 updates, news, and even debates about the game's art style. It seems some things just never change. Unfortunately, these forums were shut down in 2017. But unfortunately, the majority of their contents were archived for us to dive into and analyze. Doing so gives us a pretty accurate picture of how the community was at the time. Strangely enough, even as early as 2010, fans were picking apart these update pages and trailers with an insane level of paranoia, searching for anything that could even potentially be a hint at what was coming in the future.
Now, I have no justification or computer image wizardry skill here, but look at the 119 update page. Look at the numbers. Can anyone undistort the reflections? Perhaps there's something there. Learn to Photoshop. This is just a liquid effect. There is nothing there.
It seems the TF2 community has always been somewhat schizo when it comes to analyzing Valve's cryptic TF2 content. We'll be regularly returning to Spuff throughout the video to get a pulse on how the community was feeling during this period, as they were at the forefront of figuring out this ARG as it was happening. For the next year and a half, Valve had become completely radio silent regarding any references toward robots. It likely led many to wonder if the robot heads were a fluke, something Valve thought would be cool, but never to be seen again. It wasn't uncommon in this era for Valve to be testing the waters with TF2, trying all sorts of weapons and game modes both in the public TF2 beta and behind closed doors in an effort to see what would fit the game best. Perhaps these robot heads were just an artifact of an idea floated by Valve, and it would never see the light of day ever again. This was likely the sentiment of many TF2 fans during this time, that these supposed hints were nothing more than set dressing, and not any indication of the future. That is, until December 2011.
Hey, what is going on, everybody? Jerma here with the Australian Christmas update.
The annual Australian Christmas update arrived, featuring a bunch of new cosmetics, the first ever festivized weapons, and most importantly for us today, a single Valve-created control points map, known as Foundry. This was the only map to be released as part of this update, and for good reason, as the map had secrets hidden amidst its walls, waiting to be uncovered. The day the update was released, Spuff user VanillaBuds posted that they had discovered a set of Easter eggs on Foundry.
Heavy and Scout in a secret room on Foundry? Meet the Pyro? They're behind Red Spawn. There's a soldier guarding the door. That's actually a pretty awesome Easter egg. Looks like a Meet the Pyro secret to me. And so it begins.
VanillaBuds posted pictures of their findings, a set of Polaroids featuring various classes, and a set of numbers on the back wall. In the moment, most users initially thought that this was hinting toward the upcoming release of the Meet the Pyro short, which hadn't come out at this point. But upon closer inspection, people found more clues that led them closer to the real answer. The set of numbers on the wall near the photographs would become particularly interesting. 1961, 13, 22, 13. These numbers would be the focus of the users of the Spuff forums, as they attempted to figure out whatever message was being fed to them, to varying degrees of success.
Going with 1961 being a year, I would speculate that something happened in the TF2 universe in 1961. Perhaps the filming of Meet the Pyro happened then, or the hiring of the current mercenary team. I am really just grasping at strings here with no solid evidence.
Updates to the forum thread were rolling in minutes at a time, with dozens of users all trying to break the code. The vibe of this thread is hectic. These pictures were a potential glimpse into Valve's future plans for Team Fortress 2, and getting even a small look into the future has always been a rarity for the TF2 community, due to how enigmatic and cryptic Valve have always been. As such, this thread reads with a similar energy to starving hyenas finally being given a piece of meat to chew on and shredding it to the bone within seconds. Eventually, in mere hours after the thread's initial findings, users RT, Boomsta559, and Minimo put together a major piece in figuring out what this Easter egg meant.
Are those robot versions of the classes? Wow, I hope so. The demo clearly looks like a robot from the Coming Soon video for the NG update. I hope it is. What a twist.
Putting together the connection between the engineer update teaser and these images was a big deal, and bridged the gap of over 1 year of information. Minimo posted an image that spelled out exactly how one-to-one the images were with the models shown in the engineer trailer, and forum users rejoiced as a major puzzle piece had been put in place. This proved that this was something Valve planned for a very long time. Eventually, users also discovered that the sign advertising Dr. Wilson's Auto Borax had a segment of the text isolated by wooden beams. It read Tobor, or robot backwards, further confirming suspicions that the focus of this info was the robots exclusively, not something separate and unrelated like Meet the Pyro. Unfortunately, the number code went unsolved by Spuff users for the time being. Many of them assumed it was a date, as subtracting 1 from each number gets you 12/21/12, or December 1st, 2012. Others thought the numbers were coordinates. Putting together that 13/22/13 in coordinate form actually took you to a government hospital in Australia. Or at least that's what users said. When I tried it myself, I kept finding that using 13/22/13 as coordinates took you to some random part of Africa. Also, when I tried to find the Government Access Centre Hospital in New South Wales, Australia, I couldn't find anything. So I don't know what this person did, but I think they did it wrong. Anyways, forum users were trying anything to make these numbers fit, which makes it all the stranger that, as far as I can tell, None of them tried one of the simplest ciphers known to man, converting the numbers into letters. A simple alphanumeric conversion was all it took to turn 132213 to MVM. I suppose you can't blame them too much. None of them would have known what these 3 letters meant. But they were about to get very familiar with this acronym very soon. On May 3rd, 2012, a patch was released that updated the Thunder Mountain Manifest, which is essentially a file that cites what other files are important to a given asset. In this case, a group of references to various robot sound effects were added to the manifest for the map Thunder Mountain, all of which having a subdirectory reference titled MVM. It's unknown whether or not these references were leaked intentionally by Valve as part of the ARG, or simply added by mistake. Furthermore, I can't find any evidence of anybody finding these sound files and discussing them around the time this patch released, leading me to believe that they weren't noticed by the users investigating this ARG at the time that it was happening. A month later, on June 19th, 2012, yet another patch would be added, which kicked the investigations into high gear. However, the ARG stemming from this patch, dubbed the Pyromania ARG, is actually an entirely separate beast from the MVM ARG, and would require its own video to explain in full, so let me know down below if you'd like to see that. Though this ARG isn't directly related to Man vs. Machine, there is some notable information in this ARG that connects the two together, and shows the dedication the community had at the time to solving all of these ARGs as they were coming out. Regarding Man vs. Machine, there was a single item added to the game in this patch that pertained directly to the theme of robots in TF2, the damaged capacitor. In addition to being part of a circuit, echoing robots aesthetically, it also contained various codes hidden around it that pertained directly to the Man vs. Machine ARG. On one side of the capacitor, a string of numbers could be converted alphanumerically, spelling out one word: gray. This is significant, but I can't really address it at the moment, so we'll be coming back to it later. Text on the other side of the capacitor read as a future date, June 22nd at 6 p.m. military time, which foreshadowed a blog post made by the Pyro at that exact time. Converting Pyro's text to Morse code, with the long umphs being dashes and the short ones being dots, revealed a hidden message: Monday, the date of the upcoming Pyromania update. I wish I could find who deciphered this message first, because it's honestly one of the funniest and craziest ways I've seen a Morse code message be hidden in an ARG, ever. This all culminated in the release of the Pyromania update, which released on Monday, July 27th, 2012, alongside the long-awaited Meet the Pyro short. This was not only a major update for the game, but also the continuation of the Man vs. Machine arc. Released alongside this update was a map, Doomsday, which featured yet another secret room. This room contained the 4 photographs found in Foundry, as well as a secret map, showing off 3 locations previously unseen in the TF2 universe. Unbeknownst to players at the time, these would become the first 3 MVM maps to be added alongside the game mode itself, with Death Pit becoming Coal Town and Cactus Valley becoming Decoy. This happened on the same day as the release of Source Filmmaker, which hid within its files various models for robot heads based off of each of the 9 classes. Clearly, the community was close to getting something huge, but Valve hadn't let on exactly what it was just yet. That was because this wasn't just an update that was going to come out no matter what. No, Valve was going to set the community on a journey and force them not just to wait for the update, but to earn it. August 10th, 2012. Without warning, carrier tanks arrive on 2 Fort, Badwater, and Granary. A bloodstain appears on the TF2 blog's free-to-play banner. Clicking the bloodstain would open up a birth certificate belonging to Grey Man, the 3rd brother in the Man family, along with Blutarch and Redmond. If nothing I said just now made any sense, that's okay. I know many people who engage with TF2 aren't aware of the lore and story behind the game, and I myself didn't know much about it before researching for this video. However, it is incredibly relevant to the story being told by this ARG, so I'm going to do my best to summarize relevant parts of the TF2 lore to help you all best understand why this was so impactful for players at the time. Something I neglected to mention at the beginning of this video, because it wasn't relevant yet, was a handful of secrets hidden within the Haunted Halloween special update, released all the way back on October 29th, 2009. This was the update that first introduced the Man family, and the will of one Zephaniah Man, the father of Blutarch, Redmond, and gray. As far as I'm aware, this is the first instance of the creators of TF2 attempting to explain any sense of background behind why the events of the game take place. This will establishes that the red and blue entities players operate under in TF2 are the result of a fierce rivalry between two brothers, something that would be further expanded on in later comics and expanded universe material. But that's all far out of the scope of this video. All you need to know is that this will, released all the way back in 2009, had something of a Chekhov's gun hidden within it. A bit of text hidden by sand toward the bottom of the will, ready to be revealed whenever the time was right. Nearly 3 years later, and Valve decided that now would be the time to finally reveal what was behind that sand. The day after the first bloodstain was added, a second one would appear. Clicking on this one would reveal the full version of the will, with no sand to obscure the text. Finally revealing that Gray, the previously unknown third brother of the Mann family, had attempted to blackmail his father for some sort of miracle gravel. The significance of this reveal may not be immediately clear, but when paired with a comic that was released alongside the upcoming Man vs. Machine update, it makes a lot more sense. For those invested in the story and background of Team Fortress 2, this was essentially a reveal of the game's main villain, the antagonist that perpetuated much of the conflict that goes on in the game. He's responsible for the deaths of Redmond and Blutarch, and even hires the mercenaries themselves to fight the robots in the canonical Man vs. Machine event that takes place in the narrative. This reveal was even foreshadowed a month earlier, through the code hidden on the side of the damaged capacitor, reading one word: Gray. For players following the story at the time, these two documents alone were massive, and gave the narrative of TF2 a new focus it didn't have before. I know that was a lot to go over, so I hope you're still with me. I just felt it was necessary to give you all of the context for why this was such a big deal, and why Valve went out of their way to hide this information on their website. On the same day the will was revealed, the barely melted capacitor was added to the game. When a player equipped the capacitor and high-fived another player, a joke would be shown in chat, which held within it a secret code. This sorry excuse for comedy was essentially randomly generated, with there being a whopping 1,980 potential combinations of items possible. While many communities across the TF2 sphere were working around the clock to solve this ARG, the group largely credited with the most progress is actually an IRC chat room on gamesurge.net.
Like a master comedian, Xpaw was able to collect an insane number of jokes. From these jokes, Xkeeper was able to take this data and place it on a chart. Somebody using brilliant intellect figured out that one could attach an alphanumeric index value to each item.
And as simple as I can make it, each of the potential words in the joke corresponded with a byte of data, which could be coordinated when all of the words were arranged in alphabetical order. Additionally, the class of the player who was high-fived also altered this message, meaning a lot of data had to be gathered for each individual class. Then compared to a group of MD5 checksums that were added to TF2's item schema the same day the update dropped. You following? Cool. All of this data was then eventually translated into hex codes, leading to various file formats depending on the class being high-fived. Scout, Pyro, Heavy, and Medic all produced PNG files, each one holding a QR code. Soldier had a BMP file, Demoman had a zip file with ASCII art, Engineer had C++ code that outputted text, and Sniper had a MIDI file with Morse code. Spy had the final test, a zip file with a keypass key file required to access its contents. The key was found by converting a word hidden in each of the previous class's files into a PFP word, which is essentially like the NATO phonetic alphabet for nerds. It assigns each potential hexadecimal byte to a word, so when all of these classes' words were converted using the PFP word list, and then placed next to each other, it formed the secret code required to open Spy's keypass file. Everything I just told you was accomplished in just 12 hours after the initial release of the update that added the capacitor. 12 hours. This is one of the most insane ARG puzzles I've seen from a gaming community, and it was all put together in half a day by a handful of devoted TF2 players. This is genuinely one of the most impressive things the TF2 community has accomplished, and I'm shocked it doesn't get talked about enough. These people deserve their time in the spotlight, even if it's about 13 years too late. Anyways, the zip file hidden within Spy's keypass file contained a QR code, which required yet another ounce of decoding through a process called XORing, where images are overlaid over each other in such a way that it creates a separate image. This was all done with all of the previous QR codes to create a final ultimate QR code. That led to this image. A bloodied knife stabbed into paper, the letters T, O, B, O, and R being stained in blood, as well as an MVM Tour of Duty ticket attached to the back. Written on the paper was a recipe, which could be crafted using TF2's in-game crafting system. The first person to use the crafting recipe was supposedly a player by the name of Mr. Magula Chubb, and their actions caused a system-wide message across all of TF2 to be sent out announcing that a system breach had been detected, along with a link to a brand new Team Fortress 2 comic, Blood Brothers. With the release of this comic, a blog post was made by Valve the same day on August 12th. This post from Valve expressed some much-earned shock, as they expected the puzzle to take around 2 weeks to solve, not a mere 12 hours. Regardless, Valve confirmed that the ARG had been completed, and the following day, Valve finally announced the long-awaited robot-filled PvE update, Man vs. Machine. The community had done it. They had been given a test, passed it in record time, and were rewarded with one of the greatest updates the game had ever and would ever see. It was a wonderful time to be a Team Fortress 2 player, where events like server-wide messages about new comics and other such updates weren't super uncommon. This ARG, above all else, shows that the TF2 community has always been filled with insanely dedicated, talented people who are willing to go above and beyond to support the game that they love. On June 23rd, 2025, Valve announced that after 13 years, they'd finally be updating Man vs. Machine with brand new content. This announcement came as a shock to the community, who assumed that Valve, who now was doing next to nothing for the game, was never going to touch the decade-old game mode ever again. And yet they've decided to do so. Why? While some see this pessimistically, assuming this update will be a simple cash grab or something they're forced to do for one reason or another, I've chosen to view this more optimistically. TF2 is a game that could have dropped off the earth years ago. Many people on the Spuff forums seem to believe the game wouldn't last longer than 2015 or 2016, when the next new game came around. And yet, nearly 20 years after release, it's still standing, thanks in large part to the community's dedication in sticking with the game and playing it through thick and thin. So this upcoming update, to me, is a full circle moment for the game's favorite alternative game mode. Man vs. Machine, a game mode released as a direct result of the community's efforts, is now being updated as a result of the community's persistence. The ideal bookend to one of the craziest stories in gaming history. Thank you for watching.